Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a warrior, a chief, or a myth anyone will remember. You're an islander, one of thousands whose name was never written down and whose story was never meant to be told. You live by the tides, by the fire, by the rhythm of seasons so old they have no beginning. Your world is full of meaning, of memory, of sound. But it's also fragile. And tonight, the horizon has changed. There's something out there, a shape on the sea, and it does not belong. Before the fences rise and your language begins to vanish, do me one small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if you'd like early access to more of these slow, grim bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back. Try not to think too hard about what's coming. Let's begin. You wake before the sun, not because there's a rule or a clock, but because your body knows the shape of the morning. The wind moves differently this time of year, a little sharper, a little more urgent, and that tells you it's nearly time to move camp. The earth has already told you this in other ways. The way the wallabies travel, the angle of the stars, the taste of the water when you drink from the river bend. You don't need to ask permission to know it. You just listen. This is how it has always been. Your people don't write stories down, they carry them. Your uncle's hands know how to make fire in wet air, and your mother's voice can name every plant in a valley she hasn't seen in 20 years. Your cousin can read a possum track like others read a map. Your grandfather can look at a single rock and tell you who used it last, not by name, but by the way the edge is worn, the angle of the blade, the story it holds in its scratches. Knowledge lives in the body. It's passed in the way you walk, in what you notice, in the silences between words. There is no word in your language for history the way they mean it. No tidy line of dates, no throne rooms, no battles catalogued by year. Your history is breath and ash and footsteps. It is where a certain tree grew crooked because lightning split it during your great-grandmother's birth. It is the memory of a flood, told through a song, remembered by which bird calls come afterward. It is not something you keep in a book. It's something you are. When you speak, the land listens. And when you listen, the land speaks. You know when to burn, when to let the soil rest, when to harvest shellfish, and when to leave them. You know that too many spears in one season means fewer kangaroo in the next. You don't measure wealth in stone or gold. You measure it in generosity, in how well your people eat, in how healthy the children are. You know hunger, but you also know balance, not because you were told, but because anything else simply wouldn't work. There are clans, but no kings. Each group tends to its own places, its own spirits, its own memories, and yet you're not alone. You meet others at crossings, at shared hunting grounds, during the oyster bloom or eel run. You don't need fences to remember which land is yours. You carry it with you, in the words you use, in the songs you hum, in the dirt under your nails. Land isn't something you own. It's something you belong to. You care for it, and it cares for you. You've seen scars carved into bark where your ancestors left messages. Circles, spirals, worn places where old fires once sat. You don't always know what they mean, but that doesn't make them meaningless. You've walked in places so quiet you could hear the breath of the ground beneath your feet. You've stood at the edge of cliffs your people have stood on for longer than memory stretches, watched the sea foam against the rocks, and felt the weight of 1,000 generations in your chest. You don't live in the past, you live in a continuity. The same stars guide you, the same rivers feed you, the same wind pushes against your back as you carry firewood home. Change happens, yes. The land shifts, animals migrate, fires come and go, but it's a cycle, not a rupture. You are not the first, you are not alone. You are part of something deep and old and solid, and you are content, not in the way that means you never feel pain or hunger or grief. You've buried loved ones, nursed wounds, seen storms destroy the camps you built with your own hands. But in the way that means you understand your place, the world doesn't need to explain itself to you, because it already has, over and over again, in ways no ship could ever carry, no book could ever record. For 40,000 years, your people have walked this land, not as invaders, not as owners, as kin. You don't call it wilderness, you call it home. The rocks know your footprints, the trees recognize your breath. Even the sea, restless as it is, speaks your language. You do not know that this will end. You do not need to know. You are not waiting for change. You are not seeking anything beyond this rhythm. And when you sleep, it is not with fear. It is with trust that the seasons will return, the stars will hold their places, and the land will still remember your name. You are not prepared for what comes next. But then again, how could you be? The day begins the same as most, with mist along the river and the smell of damp earth clinging to the grass. You are down near the water's edge, checking the traps your brother set the night before, when something shifts. It's not loud, it's not fast, it's just wrong. The horizon doesn't look the way it should. There's a new shape where only clouds should be, too dark and too still to be part of the sky. You squint. It doesn't move like a bird or a whale, it hovers, solid, deliberate, unnerving. At first you think it might be driftwood, or somehow strange rock formation, carried in by the tide, but then it shifts again. It moves against the wind, not with it. You've seen canoes dance over the waves and whale fins crest through foam. This is neither. It is too large, too tall, with angles that do not belong to anything the sea should know. The shape grows as it approaches, slow and heavy, like it's being pulled toward the river mouth by some force not its own. It does not ride the water, it cuts through it. You don't shout, you don't panic. That isn't your way. You stand still, letting the sound of the breeze and the slap of waves fill your ears, while your mind works through the problem. You know the river, you know its moods, you know everything that belongs here. This does not. You call for others, low and steady, and within minutes a few more figures gather along the bank. Your uncle, your cousin, the elder from the nearby camp. No one speaks right away. You all see it now, and it sees you, though you're not sure how. The thing on the water is not made of bark or stitched hides. It is shaped from some hard material, stiff, polished, unnatural. The surface gleams in the sun, catching your eyes and holding them. Long arms extend from its body, like branches twisted in a storm, holding cloth that swells unnaturally in the wind. White cloth, tall spines, metal that catches the light like water does the moon. The smell reaches you next. Salt, smoke, something oily and bitter underneath. It is not the scent of fire, you know. This is not wood smoke. This is something fouler, heavier, like the world burning wrong. You've heard stories of strange things from the sea, passed down through quiet fireside tale, of spirits who wear false skins, of omens that ride the waves. But this doesn't feel like a spirit. It feels like a question you don't know how to answer. As the vessel draws nearer, shapes begin to emerge on its back. People. At least, you think they are people. They move like people, but they stand strangely tall, wrapped in thick coverings from head to toe. No bare skin, no bark cloaks. Their heads are hidden under strange shells. Their skin is pale, like ash left too long in the fire pit. One of them raises an arm. You cannot tell if it's a greeting or a warning. Another raises a long, thin object and peers through it. You don't flinch, but your muscles tense. Still, you do not run. This is not a time for running. It is a time for watching. You try to read their posture, their eyes, the way you would any stranger met by the river. But their eyes are hidden behind glass. Their mouths don't move in the right rhythm. Their clothes rustle like leaves, but they are made of things you cannot name. They drop anchor. You don't know the word, but you see the weight fall into the water and hold them still. They're not coming ashore yet. They wait, as if unsure. You wait too. Others begin to gather. Some sitting, Some crouch behind trees. Children are pulled gently back by their mothers. An old man mutters a warning under his breath. Your clan has not seen anything like this before. Not your generation, not your mothers, not even the stories remember a shape like this. And yet it is here. You're not afraid. Not exactly. But the air has changed. The birds have gone quiet. Even the insects seem to hum at a different pitch. The world hasn't ended. But something has tilted. Just a little. Just enough to notice. And the shape on the water does not leave. It stays there. Foreign still. Heavy. With intent. You wonder if it will come closer. You wonder if it will go away. You hope it will go away. But even as you hope, you already know. Things that move like that don't come to visit. They come to stay. The vessel doesn't vanish with the tide. It anchors itself like a tree that grew wrong, metal instead of bark, cloth instead of leaves. And it stays. For hours. For days. It's never entirely still. Rocking with the waves, but it never drifts. You begin to live with it, on the edge of your vision. Like a new boulder in the river. Like a shadow that doesn't belong. Then one morning they come ashore. The water doesn't fight them. Their smaller boats, hard and hollow, skim across the surface like beetles with rigid backs. They land awkwardly, stomping into the sand like the earth should move aside for them. They step too hard, like they don't know how to listen. Their feet drag, their bodies lurch, their clothes hang in too many layers, soaked with salt and thick with damp wool. You can smell them before they speak. Smoke, sweat, rot, something sour beneath it all, like old meat left in a sealed basket. You watch from the trees, your body still, your breath shallow. They don't move like hunters. They move like people who've forgotten how to be part of the land. Their faces are pale, not just light-skinned, but the colour of bark that's been bleached and stripped and left out under a sick moon. Some of them have growths on their chins and cheeks, scraggly hair, like dry moss. Others have skin that cracks and flakes. None of them look like they belong to this place. They don't look like spirits, but they don't look like men either. You try to decide if they're dangerous, and you can't. Not because they seem powerful, but because they seem wrong. Their bodies are wrapped in things you don't understand. Stiff coats, shiny buttons, coloured cloth knotted at the neck. Their feet are bound in leather, even in the water. One of them wears something red so bright it hurts to look at. Another has gold loops in his ears like the decorations your aunt used to tie into baskets. Only his are for display, not use. They carry objects, long black tubes, curved tools with sharp edges, metal things that shine like dew but smell of rust. They wave them around without care, not pointing exactly, but always cradling them like extensions of their arms. Some of these tools make sounds when they strike together, sharp, flat, mechanical sounds that remind you of bones snapping in winter. One of them raises a stick, and a sudden crack splits the air like thunder. Birds scream. Children run. You flinch without meaning to. No stone flew. No spear was thrown. But a tree branch snaps clean in half. The message is clear, even if the method makes no sense. They speak, but it's not speaking. It's barking, rhythmic, harsh. You hear it and feel like it should mean something, but it doesn't. The sounds are clipped, like someone chewing stones and spitting the pieces. They speak at you, not to you. Their mouths shape their language like weapons, not songs. When you respond in your tongue, they do not pause to listen. They repeat the same words, slower, louder, as if your ears are the problem. One of them gestures broadly with open hands, as though offering peace. Another steps forward with narrowed eyes and mutters something that makes the others laugh. Then come the flags, bright cloth on long poles, planted in the ground like a spear without a tip. They raise it high, dig it deep, as if the land itself is being punctured. You don't understand the gesture. You know claiming. You know boundaries. But this is something else. You've never seen a person declare ownership with fabric. You've never seen someone talk to land without first listening to it. And when you reach toward the pole to examine it, one of them shouts and raises a hand. not to greet but to stop. They walk as if the ground is theirs already. They point at the river, the hills, the trees, and speak as though naming them gives them power. You don't know the words, but you know the tone. They don't ask, they assume, they spread out. They mark spaces with rope and chalk and tools that pierce soil. One man stands on a rock and unfurls a paper covered in black markings. Another pounds a stake into the ground and mutters a prayer to no god you recognize. No ceremony, no offerings, just noise and action. You retreat, not in fear, not yet, but in distance. You watch them from further away. You discuss with your kin. You try to guess their purpose. Some think they're lost, others think they're sick. A few think they'll leave once they take what they want. But no one thinks they're here to learn. Their eyes don't move the way a visitor's should. They don't look at your faces. They look past you. They act as if the land was waiting for them, as if it had been empty, as if your presence were a detail, not a truth. At first, the land doesn't change. The hills still rise where they've always risen. The river still carves its bend beside the stone, where your grandfather once sharpened a spear. The same trees cast the same shadows in the late afternoon, but something beneath those shapes has shifted. You don't know the word for what's happening. It hasn't been given to you yet, but you can feel it, a kind of displacement without movement, a stillness that no longer welcomes you. The men from the ship stay, more arrive, the smaller boats keep coming, carrying tools, animals, even women. They build without ceremony, chopping, stacking, pounding wood into earth as if to punish it. They don't ask the land for permission, they just cut into it. One day, you pass through an open clearing that used to be a place where kangaroo would graze. And now, there are neat rows of something you don't recognise. Stalks arranged like soldiers, with cords strung between them, and ashes smouldering in piles. You see a strange plant there, that someone tells you is wheat, but it doesn't feed you. It doesn't belong. They bring fences. At first, they're simple. Tied sticks, crude barriers you could step over if you needed to. But then they change. Taller, sharper, anchored into the ground with metal and rope. They surround patches of land with these fences and call them farms. You don't know the word, but you understand the message. You used to walk here without thinking. You used to hunt here with your brothers. Now when you pass too close, someone emerges with a weapon, a long metal stick that growls when struck and kills without touching. You learn to walk wider circles. The animals begin to vanish. At first it's just the noise that changes. Fewer bird calls, less rustle in the grass. Then it's the absence of footprints in places that should be busy. Wallabies stop returning to known paths. Possums disappear from trees you've always climbed. Even the eels grow scarce, the ones you once trapped with woven reeds. You follow the water upstream and find it has been dammed, slowed by heavy planks and carved channels. They've forced the river to go somewhere else. You don't understand the word trespass, but they start using it. At first it's muttered, barked paired with pointing and sharp eyes. Then it's used in shouted commands and written notices you cannot read. Eventually, it comes with violence. A boy from your camp is shot when he walks too close to a field, just chasing a rabbit. They say he was stealing, but from who, from where? The land wasn't made with owners. It fed those who respected it. Now it feeds only those who build boxes on it. You speak to your elders, they speak to theirs. You try to understand. There must be some mistake. Maybe these men believe something untrue. Maybe if you explain the boundaries, the sacred places, the seasonal rotations, they will adjust. But they don't. They listen with polite expressions and impatient hands. They nod and then keep building, keep fencing, keep cutting into the ground like it's something to be subdued, not nurtured. One of them laughs when you explain the rules of fire burning. He says your way is primitive. He says it like it's a kind of dirt. They name things, places that already had names, names older than memory. The mountain that holds your ancestors' story is now called Wellington. The river you sang to as a child is labelled Derwent. These words arrive on maps, printed on paper you are not meant to touch. The land has not moved, but its meaning has been overwritten. The paths your people walked for thousands of years now belong to other men, men with uniforms, papers and guns. You still walk them sometimes, but only in silence, only with care. You begin to feel unwelcome in places that once held your laughter. The wind no longer seems to carry your stories. It carries theirs, hammers, wheels, horse hooves, iron. They don't hear the silence they're creating. But you do. You hear it every morning when another patch of trees is gone. Every evening when another track is cut through the bush. Your world is shrinking, and they don't even notice. And so the map is wrong now. Not because the hills have changed, but because the names have. The rules have. The punishments have. What you thought was a world of shared breath has been turned into something smaller. Lines and boundaries and signs you cannot read. And all you did was stay where you've always been. The first sickness doesn't seem like a sickness. It feels like tiredness that won't lift. Like a weight pressing into your bones that doesn't come from walking too far or sleeping on hard ground. It starts with one of the children, a low fever, flushed cheeks, eyes that look through you instead of at you. You've seen fevers before. You know which roots to boil, which leaves to crush, which songs to hum while you wait for the heat to pass. But this one does not pass. It lingers, clings, deepens, then it spreads. The cough arrives next, dry and sharp like bark peeling from a tree. It echoes in the camp at night. At first, you try to ignore it. People cough, especially in the colder season. But this is not the same. This cough builds. It steals the breath. It turns chests into drums that rattle with each breath. Some cough until their voices vanish. Some until blood comes up, staining their hands and lips. You've never seen so many people sick at once. Not like this, not so fast. The healers do what they can. They treat with knowledge passed down through generations. Techniques tested through time, but nothing seems to work. The plants don't respond. The old cures don't hold. It's as if the sickness doesn't come from the land at all, as if it was born elsewhere and brought here by accident, tucked into cloth or breath or skin. One elder whispers that the sickness came off the ship. Another points to the strange cloths and dirty hands of the newcomers, but there is no proof, no answers. Just more bodies lying still when they should be rising. You don't know the word influenza. You don't know the word smallpox, but you come to know their shape. You learn how quickly the blisters rise, how fast the heat blooms in the body. You learn that the shaking doesn't stop, that the eyes turn red, that the skin peels like bark in the sun. You learn that the ones who survive often don't look like themselves afterward. You learn the silence that follows when a child's cough stops too suddenly in the night. And you learn how quickly a camp can go quiet. Your sister loses her strength in 3 days. The day before, she was gathering firewood. Then she was lying down to rest. Then she wasn't moving at all. Your uncle tries to carry her, but her skin burns against his hands. Her breath turns shallow. She stops speaking. She never speaks again. You do not know what she had. No one tells you. No one comes to help. The colonists keep moving. They build and dig and plant and drink, as if nothing has changed. Some notice the sickness, but do nothing. Others do not seem to notice at all. A few come close and offer strange vials, bitter liquids, that make you feel worse before you feel better. If you feel better at all. Most simply keep their distance, speaking to each other in hushed tones and covering their mouths when you come near. You are not treated as a person who is ill. You are treated as something dangerous, something already lost. Then the other sicknesses come, the ones that don't leave blisters or fevers, but linger in the blood, in the womb, in the silence between lovers. You notice the changes slowly. Women who bleed too long, infants who don't cry, mothers who don't wake. Some of the colonists visit the women in the camps at night. They leave coins or beads or promises behind. Then they leave sickness too. You don't know the words for what's being done, only the shape it leaves behind, the way it hollows the eyes, the way it ends, lineages before they begin. The elders say to move inland, avoid the roads, avoid the rivers, but the sickness is already inside. It doesn't stay in one place. It travels with breath, with skin, with memory. You stop sharing food bowls. You stop sitting close at night. You stop singing. Not because the songs don't help, but because your voice is gone. Because grief has taken the rhythm from your chest. You begin to measure time not by seasons, but by burials. You stop marking the new moon. You start counting the ones who've gone. Your cousin's daughter, your grandfather's brother, your friend who used to laugh too loudly at the fire. Their names come out of your mouth too often, until you stop saying them at all. It is easier not to speak than to name another who will not answer back. You do not understand what is happening, but your body does. It learns to ache, it learns to grieve, it learns to brace for the next fever. You watch your hands tremble in the cold and wonder if that's how it begins. You listen to your chest rattle and wonder if you'll wake up again. You look at the hills you once climbed and feel too weak to try. And still the colonists come. Still they build. Still they speak in strange voices and leave doors open and bring more ships. Still they walk past your camp as if it isn't there, as if it never was. You try to meet them halfway, though there is no path between you. Your people have rules for strangers, how to approach with palms up, how to lay gifts at the edge of the fire without stepping past it, how to wait for a nod, a gesture, a returned offering. These are old customs practiced longer than anyone remembers. You use them now. You place shells, feathers, carved bone at the edge of the newly cut field. You wait nearby, silent, visible but not close, a sign of peace, of welcome, despite everything. They take the gift sometimes, but they never leave anything in return. Or if they do, it's strange. A coin, a nail, a square of cloth. Things that don't hold meaning to you. Things that can't feed anyone. They do not speak your language and they do not seem to want to learn. When you gesture, pointing to the sun, to the earth, to your own chest in the hopes of some shared word, they either laugh, ignore you, or wave their hands in irritation. Some mimic your motions mockingly. Others look past you like you're part of the scenery. Still, you try. You bring water when they look overheated. You guide them around sacred places when they wander too close. You show them where not to dig, where not to cut, where the spirits still sleep under the earth. Sometimes one of them seems to understand. There's a man with a quiet voice and sad eyes who listens when you speak. He draws pictures on scraps of paper and points to them. You don't know what the pictures mean, but his voice is softer than the rest. He doesn't carry a gun. Others are different. Some ride through the forest with dogs and weapons, looking for movement. Some fire into the bush just to hear the echo. One day, a boy from another band approaches with open hands, holding a bundle of herbs meant as a gift. He doesn't come back. You find his body 3 days later, with a hole through his chest, and the herbs still clutched in his fingers. You bury him without speaking. It becomes harder to tell which settlers will watch you and which will shoot. Some wave when they pass you on the road. Some curse. Some smile and offer food, then turn around and report your presence to soldiers. You begin to distrust even those who mean well. Their kindness feels temporary, like a breeze before a storm, like a face painted on water that disappears when you try to hold it. You retreat. You stop approaching. You move deeper into the bush, away from the roads and fences. You teach the children to walk without leaving footprints. You build fires without smoke. You whisper more than you speak. Still the danger follows. Still the clearing burns. Still, someone sees a shadow between the trees and decides it must be chased. Then come the raids, fast, loud, and impossible to predict. Camps are found and scattered. People shot in their sleep. Elders taken, women chased. You begin to carry spears again, not for hunting, but for warning. When one of your hunters is killed for stepping near a river that no longer belongs to you, his brother strikes back. He waits in the grass and drives a spear through the thigh of a settler, walking alone. The settler lives, but the retaliation is swift. A patrol comes through the next week and burns everything you cannot carry. You do not think of it as war. There are no declarations, no lines drawn on maps, no meetings between leaders. There is only movement, cautious, relentless, exhausting. There is only the sound of distant gunfire and the silence that comes after. Your people do not gather in armies. You scatter, always moving, always watching. You do not attack towns. You defend your hunting grounds, your waterholes, your families. The settlers call it aggression. They use words like savage and terror. But you only ever fought because you were being pushed. They start calling it the Black War. You don't know this name. You never used it. For you, it is just life unraveling. It is trying to stay where your ancestors stayed and being punished for it. It is choosing between hunger and danger. It is sending your children to sleep in the trees because the ground no longer feels safe. It is losing another cousin, another friend, and not being able to mourn aloud because someone might hear you. You tried to explain. You tried to share. You tried to disappear. Nothing worked. Now all you can do is survive, and even that is no longer simple. You never meant to live like prey, but one day you wake up before the sun and realize you're already walking, even before your feet hit the earth. You've started keeping things packed, tools bundled together, sleeping rolls left half-tied, food carried in pieces instead of meals. There's no more setting up camp, not properly, not with care, not like before, when the land made you feel held. Now it feels like something you're passing through, something you love, but that cannot protect you. You begin sleeping farther inland. You find the places where the underbrush is thick and the paths are not marked. The old campsites, the ones by the river bend or the clearing with the carved stone. You stop using them. They're too visible now, too known. You wonder who gave those places away, or if the strangers simply found them on their own. Either way, you don't return. You carry the memory of those fires, those songs, those nights, but you do not go back. Memory is safer than presence. You stop lighting fires unless you're sure the smoke will vanish into fog or trees. Even then, the flames are small, just enough to warm your hands, not enough to cook or comfort. You eat raw when you have to, cold when it's necessary. The old ways of preparing food, of boiling and roasting and sharing, feel dangerous now. You whisper instead of calling out. You use hand signals instead of names. Even laughter becomes a risk, something that might carry on the wind to ears you can't see. The children learn quickly. You don't need to explain the rules more than once. Don't speak unless you must. Don't run unless everyone runs. Don't leave footprints. Don't ask where someone went if they haven't come back. You teach them how to move through brush without rustling it, how to sleep with one eye half open, how to recognize the sound of a gun being cocked, even when it's far off. They shouldn't have to know these things, but they do, and they remember. You no longer walk on the main trails. Those were once the paths your people used for generations, safe routes that led between water sources and good hunting grounds. Now they belong to the settlers. They've been widened, marked, cut into the land like scars. You move through the places they cannot reach. Steep ravines, thick swamps, ridge lines covered in tangled brush. You know where to step and how to blend. You move like mist, not because it's your nature, but because it's your only choice. Every so often, you hear gunshots in the distance. Sometimes they're followed by silence, sometimes by screams, sometimes by nothing at all. You don't investigate. You already know what happened. It's easier to keep walking than to find another body. You come across the remains of a fire you didn't make, a set of footprints that lead into the woods but don't come out, a scrap of cloth snagged on a thorn bush. You say nothing. You keep moving. You begin to forget the feeling of stillness, of staying anywhere long enough to hear birds return, or to see the plants recover where your feet have pressed them. You move too often for the forest to remember you. It gives you shelter, but not recognition. You become a shadow in your own country. And still, the forest is shrinking. You come across more felled trees, more cleared ground, more strange crops in rows. Their fences now press against places you once thought unreachable. Even the highlands grow thinner. The places you thought were safe now ring with axe strikes and distant dogs. You hold on to what you can. The language you speak becomes quieter, but it remains. The songs, the ones not meant to be sung aloud, you keep inside your chest. You teach them in whispers, when the wind is loud enough to carry the sound away. The stories you once told around fires are now passed in fragments, told in darkness, remembered more in feeling than in words. You stop carving into trees. You stop leaving markers. Anything visible could lead them to you. Your culture doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. But underground is not where it's meant to live. These things were born in sunlight, in movement, in open air. They weren't meant to be secrets. You feel the pressure of it building, the weight of all that you're trying to carry without being seen. You fear it will break under the silence. You do not sleep deeply anymore. Every rustle wakes you. Every creak of a branch feels like warning. You've begun to dream of running, even when your body lies still. The sound of it follows you, day and night, the breaking of twigs, the breath caught in your throat, the thud of feet behind you. It is not always real, but it could be. And that's enough. One day, you're told the land has been claimed. Not just a patch of it, not a hill or a river bend, all of it. The forests, the plains, the rocks, the water, the sky above the mountains. It has been divided, labelled, measured with string and sticks, and sold. Sold by men who do not live here, to other men who have only just arrived. You do not remember being asked, you do not remember saying yes, but they show you papers with seals pressed into them, signatures written in looping ink. They point to these marks and tell you it is legal. The hills where your ancestors were buried now have numbers. The valleys where your people held ceremony are now part of something called a settlement. You are told that someone owns it, that someone bought it. You ask who sold it to them. They don't answer, or they laugh, or they look at you like you've missed something obvious. They say the land didn't belong to anyone before, that it was empty, that it was there for the taking. There is a word they use, terra nullius. You don't hear it then. You hear it years later, when the people who took your land explain what they did as if it were a story from long ago, a justification written in Latin. Land belonging to no one. That's what they called your country. That's what they wrote in their ledgers. That's what they put on the maps they carried here in their pockets. They looked at your rivers, your forests, your sacred stones, and they saw nothing. Not absence of life, absence of ownership. Not silence, a lack of contracts. You had no paper, no ink, no stamps, no flags, no courts. You had knowledge passed through language, through story, through skin. You had boundaries marked by rock formations, animal paths, star lines. You knew whose land was whose. You knew where you could walk and where you should stop. You knew the lines even if they weren't drawn. But these were not the right kind of lines. They were not the kind you could carry in your pocket and unroll on a desk, so they were ignored. They called it wilderness, untamed, unsettled. They looked at your camps and called them temporary. They saw your movement and called it aimless. They saw your lack of fences and said, you must not have understood land. You tried to explain that the land is not something to be broken into pieces, not something to be bought or hoarded or stripped, that it breathes, that it remembers, that it gives to those who listen. But they were not listening. You try again. You bring elders to speak to them. You point to the places that matter, the ones you were taught to protect. They smile tightly, shift their weight, glance at one another. They don't say no. They say you are not using it properly, that you have no formal claim, that you are not, in legal terms, a landholder. You do not understand what they mean. You only understand that it's already been decided. Land titles are handed out to strangers. Men with polished boots and pressed jackets arrive with their documents and pick where they will settle. They speak as if they have always owned these places. They build fences before learning the shape of the ground. They cut trees before knowing what lived in them. They claim the water as if it does not travel. They claim the stone as if it does not remember other names. You try to argue, but your words don't seem to reach. Not because they can't hear, but because they've placed you in a different category altogether. Not a neighbour, not a person with a dispute. You begin to realise that to them, you're not human in the right way, not civilised, not educated, not advanced. Their papers do not include you. Their laws do not protect you. You exist on the land, but outside the system. You are seen, but you are not counted. They say the land has been purchased. You were never there. That is how they explain it, not with violence, but with a mission. Not by driving you out, but by pretending you were never part of it. They do not erase you with weapons. They erase you with maps. And once the line has been drawn, a line you cannot see, a line you never crossed, it becomes illegal to return to where you've always been. There is a number now. You don't know what it means, only that it has been attached to you, or rather, to your death. Someone has written it down, spoken it aloud in a distant room, and made it official. You are worth something now. Not because of who you are, but because of what they want to remove. You don't know the word bounty, but you learn what it does. You learn that men who've never met you are now being paid to find you, and not to speak to you, not to ask you anything, just to find you, and make sure you don't walk away. The forest becomes more dangerous than ever, not just because of the trees falling or the fences creeping outward, but because of who enters it now. Strangers with guns and grim smiles, following prints with practiced ease. Some wear uniforms, others don't. Some come alone, others in groups. They aren't always soldiers. Some are settlers. Some are convicts offered release in exchange for violence. Some are just men who like the hunt. They track you like game, using broken branches and disturbed soil. They learn your paths and set traps along them. Not just snares for animals now, but iron jaws meant for people. And then come the dogs. You hear them before you see them. Snarling, barking, sniffing through undergrowth with urgency. Not wild dogs, trained ones, brought by the colonists, taught to hate the scent of your skin. They do not hesitate. They do not scare easily. When they find your camp, they attack without waiting. They tear through bark shelters, dig through ashes, bite at arms and ankles and necks. You can't outrun them unless you've planned the escape before the first bark sounds. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The British call it order, protection, pacification. They say you're being managed. They say the situation is under control. But what you see are patrols walking in lines with rifles raised. You see men gathering near the river to organise what they call a sweep. You see torches moving through the trees at night. You hear the snap of a branch and wonder whether it's someone hunting or someone being hunted, and you stop sleeping again. You stop settling again. You become once more a shadow among the leaves. They begin capturing people instead of just shooting them. Or perhaps they were always doing it, and now it is simply happening more. You hear of men being dragged from their shelters, tied at the wrists, and marched toward camps you cannot enter. You hear of women taken in the night and never seen again. Children caught near the edges of settlements and put to work, though no one says what that work is. Some who are taken return, but they're quieter. They don't explain where they were. They just shake their heads and look at the ground. Prison camps begin to form, fenced spaces near the coast or on the edges of growing towns, places where people are collected. You hear they're fed there, that there are beds, that they are safe. But you've seen the men who run them. You've seen the bruises. You've heard the stories from those who escaped. The walls are made of wood, the chains of iron. The people inside no longer speak freely. They do not sing. They do not return to the land. Whatever lives behind those fences is not freedom. It is containment. You try to understand what you've done, why this is happening. You think back through each decision, where you walked, who you spoke to, what food you took from the land. None of it feels like a crime. You did not steal. You did not invade. You simply stayed. And yet, you are being punished for existing where others now claim you do not belong. You are called a threat, a problem, a native menace. You are a target, and you don't even know what law you've broken. You stop trusting anyone, not just the colonists, even some of the people who used to share your fire. A few have started working with the British. Some are trackers, trained to follow footprints and earn pay for every capture. Others serve as intermediaries, bringing messages between camps and stations, always watched, always uncertain. You don't know why they do it. For food, for safety, out of fear, out of choice. You stop asking. You stop assuming. You speak only when you must, and only to those who've walked beside you long enough to earn silence. The forest closes in tighter. The air grows heavier. The dogs patrol more often. And the bounty remains, tied to your life, by numbers you still don't understand. You were born on this land. You know every tree, every stone. But now, you move through it like a fugitive, like a danger, like something that must be caught and caged. They've put a price on your existence, and suddenly, everyone has a reason to look for you. It happens slowly at first, Tok hints, a shift in tone, in sound, in rhythm. One day, your daughter comes to you and says something you don't quite follow. Her voice is familiar, but the words are shaped differently, bent at angles your ears don't recognize. You ask her to repeat it, and she does a little louder, thinking perhaps you didn't hear. But the problem isn't volume, it's the language. Somewhere between being born and this moment, she has started speaking in a tongue that does not belong to your people. You didn't teach her that language, someone else did. One of the women from the mission station, perhaps, or one of the men who walk around the church in stiff clothing, always with paper in their hands and tired smiles on their faces. They visit your camp sometimes. They say they are there to help. They say the old ways are fading and the children must be prepared for the future. You don't remember asking for their help, but they come anyway, and they stay longer each time. At first they offered food, clothing, blankets. Then they offered lessons. Then they stopped offering and started taking. Children disappear for days, then weeks. They are brought to schools where they sit in rows and repeat words that don't come from the land. They are told to speak properly, to stop muttering the old syllables. They are told the stories their grandparents told them are wrong, that there is only one book now, that only one kind of truth matters. Some children come back different, some don't come back at all. You begin to hear laughter that doesn't sound like home, words exchanged between siblings that you don't recognize. When you correct them, gently, patiently, they look at you with a strange kind of pity, like you are the one who doesn't understand. One boy refuses to use his given name. He insists on a new one, the one they call him at school. Another child, no more than 6, tells you your stories are just old tales and asks if you've ever seen a map. You have, but it didn't show your country. You try to keep teaching. You show them how to shape a fishing spear, how to sing the eel song, how to track by looking at the way grass bends under the weight of passing feet. But fewer of them want to learn. Some pretend not to hear. Some say they don't have time. Others repeat what the mission teachers told them, that these skills aren't useful anymore, that nobody lives like that now. You open your mouth to argue, to explain that they are still living like that you are, but the words catch in your throat. The songs start to go first. You notice it during the cold season, when you gather together and someone should start the chorus to warm the air. No one does. The younger ones don't know the first line. One tries, falters, and then shrugs. You find yourself singing alone. then stopping halfway through because the silence around you feels heavier than the melody. You think about how your own mother used to sing without thinking, how the songs lived in her chest like breath. Now they feel like something foreign. The tools change too. Children once learned to shape stone and carve bark with practiced ease, sitting beside the elders for hours, repeating motions until they got them right. Now they are handed spoons, metal cups, unfamiliar things that feel cold in the hand. They do not know how to shape resin. They do not know how to make a fire drill. You try to show them, but their attention is elsewhere. Their hands do not remember what yours never forgot. And then come the questions. Your granddaughter asks what it used to be like, before the fences, before the roads, before the patrols and papers and churches. She looks at you with open eyes and waits for the answer. You try to find the words. You reach into the place where memory and language live, but something is missing. The words come out broken, hollow, not quite right. You speak, but she tilts her head. She does not understand, or maybe she does, but not in the way she should. You say less after that. You answer with nods, with silence. You have lived through the burning of your homeland, the scattering of your people, the quiet violence of hunger and sickness. But this forgetting, feels different. Not like death, but like unraveling, like trying to hold water in your hands. You were told the land was no longer yours. Now your language isn't either. Your knowledge is treated like folklore. Your grandchildren grow up speaking the words of those who took everything. And they don't know what was lost. You sit by the fire, what little fire you still dare to build, and listen to your granddaughter sing a song she learned from her teacher. It's in a language you've come to recognize, but will never call your own. She sings it beautifully. You close your eyes and pretend it means something else. There is a woman now whose name they repeat often. You've heard them say it, slowly, carefully, like they're afraid to get it wrong. They call her Truganini. They say she's the last of her kind, the last of your kind. As if everything that came before has been narrowed into one person, like a seed pressed flat and labelled for display. They speak her name with a kind of reverence, but it isn't love. It's something colder, something like ownership. You knew her, or someone like her. You passed her once near the coast many years ago. Her face was hard to read, and she didn't speak unless spoken to. The stories say she survived longer than most, that she learned to move between worlds, to speak both languages, to follow the rules when the rules changed faster than anyone could keep up. They say she served the British sometimes, guided them through places she once walked freely, but you never blamed her for that. You understood. Survival isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just quiet, desperate obedience. Now her story is not her own. The British have taken it and folded it into paper. They write her life in books. They speak about her in rooms she never entered, in languages she did not grow up hearing. They call her a symbol, representative, a specimen. They photograph her. They draw her face from memory, then exaggerate it. They make her smaller and grander at the same time. They say she is part of history now, but they forget to ask who she really was. You hear the word extinct. You don't understand it at first. Then you begin to see it in their reports, in the way they speak about your people in the past tense, as if you are already gone, as if no one remained, as if the children who still live in the hills, the elders who still whisper the old words, are ghosts, not people. They walk past you and say your culture was. They study your language as if it's dead. They treat your survival like an oversight. They begin to collect you, not the living, the dead. They come with notebooks, with measuring cords and bone calipers. They dig up burial grounds, catalogue skulls, count teeth. They remove bodies from places meant to be sacred and ship them off to museums. Some bones are boxed and numbered. Others are put on display. People walk past the skeletons of your ancestors and murmur observations about cranial shapes and tribal classifications. You are categorized, charted, reduced. You don't understand how someone can look at a skull and forget the person it once held, but they do. They speak of you like you are a curiosity, a puzzle, a problem to be solved and filed away. They compare you to other types, stacking skulls like specimens in a drawer. The words they use are clinical, native, relic, subspecies. You are no longer part of a living people. You are data, and yet you are still here. You breathe, you walk, you mourn. But it is as if your presence is an inconvenience to their story. They already wrote the ending. You are meant to be gone. And since they said you are, then anything left must not count. The children are half-caste, the women are domesticated, the men are vagrants. The lines between your history and their version of it begin to blur. You are alive, but according to them, you've already ended. They record your name in their books, but it is not your name. They ask you to repeat it, then spell it phonetically, shaping it to fit their mouth. When it doesn't sound right, they change it. They assign numbers. They call you by place names or vague tribal categories that never existed before they arrived. You say who you are, and they nod, but they write something else. One day, a man with fine boots and clean hands writes down that the last of your people has died. He writes it in ink and stamps it with a seal. He does not look up to see you watching him. He does not ask if the hills still remember your footsteps. He does not wonder whether the songs still live, even if they are sung in secret. You are not Truganini. You are not a relic. You are not extinct. But none of that matters to the men holding the pens. What they write becomes truth. What they say becomes history. And there is no space in their version of it for someone like you. You see the man come down from the coast with a satchel full of documents and a voice that carries like a cough in winter. He doesn't look at you. He looks at the buildings, the fences, the hills. He meets with other men and sits at a table, and together they decide what still exists. He does not ask who remains. He does not walk past the trees where your children sleep. He does not speak to the old woman who still remembers the eel songs. He doesn't need to. He has the papers, and the papers say everything. He declares your people extinct, not in a voice of malice, just certainty, finality, like someone crossing off a list, one line in one record, signed in ink that will not fade, and the matter is considered settled. The Palawa, he writes, no longer exist, not in the way that counts, not in the way that fits inside columns and categories, not in a way that can be registered, taxed, governed, or photographed. You're not gone, just missing from the version of the world he understands. It happens slowly, and then all at once. The officials stop tracking your movements. The census stops asking for your name. The missions close or are repurposed. No more funds are set aside. No new records are kept. You become something historical, something mentioned in lectures, something children read about in school and forget by the next term. The maps are redrawn without you. The textbooks refer to your customs in the past tense. Your stories are shelved in archives you'll never be allowed to enter. And yet you are still here. You wake up in the morning. You drink from the stream. You gather roots with your niece. You teach her quietly how to listen for the birds that lead you to honey. You sit by the fire, what little fire you're still allowed, and listen to the wind move through the grass like it always has. But something in you has shifted. It's not just that they've stolen your land. It's that they've buried you in absence. You walk past your own absence. It is printed on notices nailed to doors, written into the margins of government reports, spoken aloud by strangers who stand on stages and say, confidently, that no one remains. They list your customs as extinct, your songs as lost, your people as absorbed. The words are careful, technical, and devastating. You are called a remnant, a footnote, a mistake in a system that no longer knows how to recognize you. You begin to speak less, not because your voice is gone, but because there is no space left for it. Every time you try to correct the story, it bends around you. When you say you're Palawa, they say that's not possible. When you point to your family, they ask for proof. When you explain your lineage, they call it folklore. The truth of your body is no longer enough. They want documents, but the papers have already been written, and they say you are no longer real. Your grandchildren learn to answer differently when asked where they come from. They are taught to be quiet, to blend in, to avoid the attention that brings questions. They know who they are. You've made sure of that. But they carry it in silence, not as pride, as protection. There is no ceremony for erasure, no moment where a bell rings and a curtain falls. It is more like smoke, creeping, curling, filling every space until the old air can't be breathed anymore. You feel it when you pass through a town built on your hunting ground, and the streets are named after British admirals. You feel it when you hear school teachers describe your ancestors as vanished. You feel it when you look at a stone that once held a carved memory, now scrubbed clean and labelled with something new. You are still alive, but history has been written without you. And history, once printed, is hard to undo. The silence becomes louder than your voice. It drowns you slowly. It follows you from the hills to the coast and back again. Not like a scream, just like a weight. You live beneath that weight now, breathing, walking, teaching when you can. But it is not the same. You have not been defeated, but you have been declared over. And that kind of death, the kind that is written down and accepted, is harder to fight than any bullet. They recorded your extinction. They signed it, stamped it, and stored it on a shelf. And you are still here. You hear about it before you see it. Whispers pass between camps, between elders and wanderers, between those still hidden and those who've already been caught and released. There is a plan, they say, something bigger than patrols, bigger than the bounty hunters. Not just men walking the forests with dogs and muskets, something else. A line, a wall, a moving wall of men that will cross the island from one coast to the other, shoulder to shoulder, weapon to weapon, driving everything before them. At first, it sounds impossible. How do you sweep a forest like a floor? How do you push people like cattle across a place this large? Then you begin to see the signs. More men appear in nearby towns. Strange uniforms, supplies, noise, soldiers in formation, lined up like children, being taught to march. The word goes around. Convicts have been conscripted, settlers recruited, soldiers reassigned. All of them moving inland. Not to build, not to trade, to remove. You are not named in their proclamations. Not directly. They say it is for security. They say it is to bring peace. But you know what they mean? You've lived under the sound of gunfire long enough to recognise the difference between law and removal. This isn't war. Wars have enemies, treaties, endings. This is something colder, something methodical. You are not being fought, you are being erased. The line begins in the south and moves north, cutting across rivers, hills, plains. Thousands of men, ordered into formation like a single moving arm. They carry rifles, bayonets, chains. Some carry maps, others carry torches. They advance each day, sweeping the land before them. Not just you, everything. Any sign of movement is chased. Any sound is hunted. They aren't trying to capture warriors. They are clearing the land. You are not a soldier. You are a shape they want gone. You watch from the shadows as they move through the brush. They are loud, clumsy, but there are so many of them it doesn't matter. If you flee one part of the line, you run into another. If you hide, they wait. If you remain still, they bring dogs. You have never seen the land so full of strangers. They trample the trails your ancestors walked. They sleep under trees you used to name. They piss in the creeks. They laugh. They shout to each other like this is a game. And it is a game to some of them. You see it in their eyes. This isn't justice, it's sport. You hear one of them brag that he's been promised land for every native he helps remove. Another says he'll be rewarded with coin. Another says he doesn't care either way, that it's just orders. But none of them ask who you are. They do not ask what you believe, where you came from, why you're here. They already decided. You are a problem to be solved. You begin to move at night again. You double back. You split up. You do what your people have always done. Adapt, survive. But there is nowhere left to go. They've mapped the land into squares. They've fenced the rivers. They've taken the coasts. You are pushed into corners of forest that no longer feel like home. And even those are shrinking. The line is behind you. The sea is in front of you. There is no path that does not lead into their hands. When they catch you, they don't celebrate. They log it. They write your name, or what they think is your name, into a book. They mark a tally. They escort you to a camp, or a holding area, or sometimes they just tie your hands and wait for someone else to collect you. You are not questioned. You are not charged. You are not even really seen. You are processed, like meat, like spoil, like waste. The ones who escape become ghosts, not stories, just movements in the dark, rumours. The men in the line say they've caught most of you. They say it with pride, but you know they're wrong. Some of you are still watching, still listening, still remembering, but fewer each day and quieter. The line moves on. It finishes its march and disbands. The men go home. They say the land is safe now. They say the problem has been resolved. They publish reports with neat figures and vague conclusions. They do not name the people taken. They do not name the people lost. They do not name the children who never returned. You are not an enemy. You are not even asked to surrender. You are just dust, and now they believe the wind has cleared you away. They tell you it's for your safety, that where you are now is no longer sustainable, no longer permitted, no longer appropriate. The word rolls off their tongues as if it were a kindness, as if you are not being taken, as if you are being saved. They don't say exile, they say relocation, they say resettlement, they say protection, but you've learned not to listen to their words. You watch what they do, and what they do is remove you. They gather what's left of your people, not many, not enough, and march you toward the boats. Some are already there, others come behind. The old, the injured, the ones too tired to resist. You're told you'll be brought to an island where you will be fed and clothed. A place with beds and medicine, and someone to look after you. You ask what's wrong with the land you already have. No one answers. Or worse, they look at you like they forgot you still thought of it as yours. The boat is crowded, and the air is thick with salt and illness. You've never been on one this large before. It does not glide like a canoe. It groans, lurches, struggles against the water. You grip the sides and say nothing. Your stomach turns. Some of the children are already crying. Some have gone quiet. You do not look back at the shore. You've already said your goodbyes to the hills, to the trees, to the fire pits. You'll never rebuild. You hold their shape in your mind and press your jaw shut. The only thing worse than leaving is being told it's for your own good. Flinders Island is colder than where you came from. The wind carries differently, not just across the skin, but through it. The land doesn't welcome you. It tolerates you, barely. The camp is already there, surrounded by fences and rules. They call it a settlement. But it feels like something else. The buildings are bare and cracked. The roofs leak. The beds are too small and too close together. There is no privacy, no ceremony, no room to be yourself. Just lines, schedules, orders. You are given new clothes, stiff, ill-fitting, soaked through with rain within days. You're told to wear shoes, even though your feet are used to the earth. You're told when to wake, when to eat, when to pray. A man in a black coat walks between the dwellings each morning, carrying a book. He reads from it out loud, even when no one is listening. He says he's come to save your soul. You didn't know it needed saving. Your food changes. There is bread now, hard and dry, salt meat that smells like it's already turned. Tea that tastes of boiled leaves, but offers no nourishment. You miss wallaby, roots pulled from riverbanks, shellfish roasted over coals. Now you are fed according to ration, not rhythm. Your stomach stays full sometimes, but never satisfied. When you ask for something better, they say you should be grateful. Your name changes. Sometimes it happens by mistake, a misheard word, a misspelled entry, a name twisted into something shorter or more pronounceable. Other times, it's deliberate. You're told you must take a proper name, one from the Bible, one easier to record. The one you were given by your mother becomes an embarrassment, a problem, a thing they say with smirks or forget to say at all. You stop correcting them. After a while, you start forgetting it yourself. They say this is mercy, that this is better than being hunted, better than hiding in the forests, better than dying alone. And maybe it is, but it is not living. You exist now in the in-between, not free, not quite imprisoned, not at war, but not at peace. You walk between buildings that were never meant to be homes. You lie on a bed that never warms. You dream of songs you can't remember the ending to. The others around you change. Some shrink into silence, some break beneath it. Others try to find meaning in what's left, carving, stitching, humming pieces of old melodies when they think no one is listening. You watch a man draw in the dirt with a stick. The curve of a river you once drank from, a mountain you haven't seen in years. He smooths it away with his hand before the warden passes. They've taken your land, your language, your fire, your movement. Now they've taken even the view. The sea surrounds you, but you cannot leave. It presses close, a reminder of distance, not freedom. They call this island a refuge. You know it for what it is, a cage with no bars, a silence with no end. You watch from the island as more sails rise on the horizon, white, steady, confident. They come without pause, without question. They do not look for you. They are not searching. They know exactly where they're going. They come with tools, with bricks, with paper plans folded neatly in their coat pockets. They step onto the land like it's been waiting for them. Not one of them asks what was here before. The towns grow quickly. Roads are carved like scars into hillsides that once held your stories. You hear rumours of places that used to hold your people, cleared, renamed, planted over with wheat and sheep. New buildings rise where fires once danced. Church bells ring where corroboree drums once sounded. The ground is still warm with your memory, but no one feels it through their boots. Children are born who do not know your name. Their parents speak of the old natives in past tense. Their teachers say you lived simply and died out. They describe your life like it was an inconvenience, or worse, a curiosity. Something that got in the way of progress, something romantic. They say you wandered, that you had no homes, no farms, no civilization. They point at fences and call them order. They point at you and say nothing at all. You are not gone, but you are not seen. There is no one to stop the ships, no one to ask where the old people went. When a settler finds a cracked tool buried in a field, he puts it on a shelf and calls it artifact. He does not ask whose hand shaped it. When they find your burial sites, they dig through them as if they are just piles of dirt. They study the bone, but not the breath that once filled it. Your sacred grounds become quarries. Your pathways become livestock trails. You once marked the seasons by the movement of stars and the flowering of certain trees. Now, they're measured in shipments, in census counts, in production yields. The land is spoken of in terms of value. How many heads of cattle it can hold, how much timber it can provide, how many acres can be cleared before the next planting. There is no word for spirit in their maps, only property lines. Your songs are no longer sung except in fragments. A single line remembered by a grandmother, a half-hummed tune passed from one child to another before it fades. They don't travel far. There are no fires large enough to carry them across the water now. Your language is kept like an ember, hidden, protected, dying slowly. When you speak it aloud, others stare like it's a trick, like something pulled from a box in a museum. Your dead are not returned. The ones taken for study remain behind glass. Even the ones buried properly lie in silence beneath towns that do not know their names. There are no stones, no markers, just forgotten ground paved over and called new. You walk those streets sometimes, quiet, unnoticed. The buildings are tall. The windows reflect your face, but no one else sees it. The hills no longer echo your name, not because you stopped calling, but because there is too much noise now. The world is full of new sounds, hammers, wheels, steam, shouting. There is always shouting, and none of it is in your tongue. The birds still sing, but you can't hear them over the engines. The rivers still move, but they've been narrowed and redirected. The silence between things, the space where meaning used to live, that's gone too. You pass through a town one evening and see people laughing, eating, lighting lamps. They are not cruel. They are not thinking of you at all. That is the part that hurts. Not hatred, not fear, just absence. They do not ask where you are. They do not ask who was here before. They do not feel the weight of it under their feet. The world is still full of sound, but none of it remembers you. You are a ghost now, not the kind that knocks over chairs or whispers in dreams. A quieter kind. The kind that lives in the soil, in the edges of old trees, in the pause before a story starts. The kind that watches the sunset and knows no one is watching it the same way anymore. And even if you screamed, they would not hear you. Not because you have no voice, but because the world has already moved on. After enough time has passed, after your fires have been extinguished, your name scraped from the maps, your children taught to be quiet, they begin to speak of you again. Not to you, about you. You've become something they can say out loud now, because you're no longer a presence. You are a memory, and memories, when held by others, can be shaped into anything. They tell stories about the last Tasmanian. They do not agree on who it was. Some say it was a woman, others say it was a man. Sometimes both are mentioned in the same breath, as if it were a role to be cast rather than a life to be lived. They give them names, dates, titles, but never voices. The stories are always told by someone else, a historian, a painter, a teacher with a chalkboard. The people who once looked away now look back, as if they always cared. They make statues, they mount plaques, they hang paintings in halls with polished floors and quiet echoes. Your likeness, or something meant to resemble it, is frozen in metal or smeared onto canvas. But it's not you. The eyes are wrong. The mouth is too composed, the posture too proud. They sculpt sorrow onto your face and call it dignity. They say you were brave, that you carried your people's legacy alone, that you walked into extinction with grace. You don't remember it that way. They say you were noble, as if nobility could explain being hunted, as if suffering becomes something beautiful once it's over. They speak of your culture with admiration now, like a collector admiring a broken vase. They mourn the loss of your songs while still refusing to hear them. They display your tools in glass cases, but don't know how to hold them properly. They teach school children to feel sad, not angry. They teach tourists to feel curious, not responsible. The truth is quieter, harder to sculpt, so they soften it, round the edges, rewrite the ending. Your fight becomes resilience. Your fear becomes wisdom. Your erasure becomes fate. It's easier that way, or easier to tell a story where the loss was inevitable, where you were always going to vanish, where no one had to make choices to cause it, where you disappear without struggle, without contradiction, without complexity. They rewrite you as a symbol, not a person, a lesson, a warning, something people can point to and feel something, but not too much. Not the kind of grief that lingers, just enough to feel like they've learned something, then move on. They do not talk about the diseases, the shootings, the black line, the dogs. They mention conflict. They mention tension. They avoid the word violence. They never say, genocide. You were not brave, that's not what it was. You were tired, you were hunted, you were displaced, renamed, processed, studied, and finally declared extinct by men who never looked you in the eye. You survived longer than anyone expected, but survival was not triumph. It was a long, slow narrowing of life, a silence that expanded year by year until you could no longer hear yourself. And when the silence became complete, or so they thought, they began to speak over it. They filled it with their own versions. You were turned into a chapter, a museum label, a cautionary tale that ends before it really begins. Your story was shortened, simplified, and translated into a language that doesn't carry your weight, and once it was rewritten, they claimed it was always theirs to tell. Your name, the real one, was not carved into any monument. Your voice as the real one was never recorded. The details of your days, your loves, your fears, your joys, they are not known. They were never asked. You were never considered a person worth knowing while you lived, only worth remembering once you couldn't speak for yourself. They don't remember you. They remember the version of you they created, and that version was never meant to survive. You thought in the beginning that the ship would leave, that it would drop anchor, stay for a while, trade or take or talk, and then disappear over the horizon like any other storm. You watched it come through the morning mist with caution, with curiosity, with the hope that this was just a moment. Something strange, yes. Something unsettling, but not permanent, not forever. You were wrong. The ship did not leave, it multiplied. One became two, two became many. The harbour filled, the rivers filled, the coastline changed shape. What once was still water became a road for arrivals, unceasing, confident, and blind. The sky above the sea was never empty again. There was always another mast on the horizon, another flag, another face that did not recognise yours. You still remember the shape of the first one, its long wooden hull, the white sails bloated with wind, the way it cut across the water like it was dividing the world. But now, there are so many you cannot tell them apart. Their names change, their flags change, the faces on board grow older, grow newer, grow louder, but the ship itself, the thing it represents, never changed. It still arrives with the same silence, the same assumption that nothing important existed before it. You remain, but not as yourself, not entirely. The person you once were, the one who knew the forest by the sound of its birds, who knew the land by foot, not fence. That person still lives somewhere beneath your skin, but the world no longer knows how to greet them. You walk the same ridges, but they no longer hold your stories. You sing the same songs, but there's no one left to harmonise. Your name still fits in your mouth, but fewer people know how to say it. You wear different clothes now, speak in fragments of other languages, raise your children to survive in a world that cannot hear their ancestors. You teach them what you can, in the spaces that still exist, between buildings, behind rules, beneath expectations. You teach them to notice, to remember, to listen, even when no one else does. You do this not because you believe it will change everything, but because it is what remains. You hold on to what the world has not yet stolen. And yet some days, you forget things, small things. The word for a kind of bark, the path through a particular ravine, a song your grandmother used to hum, not because they didn't matter, but because the world has grown loud and the silence between things has grown thin. You find yourself walking familiar places and feeling unfamiliar, as if the land recognises you, but cannot remember why. The hills still rise, the rivers still flow, the wind still moves through the grass in the old rhythm, but it does not speak aloud anymore. It whispers, if it speaks at all. The land has not forgotten you, but it has grown quieter in your absence. It waits, not for apology, not for recognition, but for return. And you try to return, every day, but you know the line has been drawn. The ship is still in the harbour. and everything that followed it is still here. They built towns on your sacred grounds. They paved roads over your trails. They named mountains that already had names. They buried their dead beside your dead and never learned the difference. And now they walk these places with no sense of the blood beneath their feet. Not because they're cruel, because they have been allowed to forget. You are not a relic. You are not a ruin. You are not a statue carved in regret. You are a person walking through a world that once belonged to your people, a world that still echoes with their footsteps, if only faintly. You are not finished. You are not over. But you are changed. The ship never left, and neither did you. It's still there in the harbour. Only now it is many ships. And you, standing at the edge of the water, are not waiting anymore. You are remembering. And there is power in that. Quiet, steady, unfinished. The land still holds your breath, even if it no longer speaks your name. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a conclusion, just the quiet continuation of something left unwritten. If you're still awake, thank you for walking the edge of erasure with me. History isn't always war or empire. Sometimes it's a silence that settles over the land, a voice lost mid-sentence, a people who never truly vanished, only stopped being seen. If you'd like early access to future stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or want to help keep these echoes alive a little longer, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment if there's a forgotten corner of the past you'd like to see covered next. Sleep well,